Hello everyone and welcome back to Simply Biology. Today we're going to be focusing on cell membranes. Now in today's video we're going to focus on how a cell membrane is far more complex than the two-dimensional organelle that was focused on at GCSE and at younger age groups. Today we're going to be showing you how a cell membrane is a three-dimensional phospholipid bilayer that is a vital part of the cell. So we're going to firstly start with the functions of the cell membrane. So the function of a cell membrane is to control the entry and exit of molecules in organelles. Now an organelle is just a different component of a cell, such as the nucleus, the mitochondria or the ribosomes. In eukaryotic cells, all organelles are encased by a cell membrane. And then that leads me on to my second point. In eukaryotic organisms, a cell membrane functions to isolate specific organelles to enable them to carry out specific functions, such as mitochondria, which is used to conduct aerobic respiration to produce ATP, which is energy. Also, they're used to provide a chemical surface for reactions. So, for example, a lot of reactions can take place on the cell membrane, like I've just said, the production of ATP through the binding of enzymes to the cell surface membrane of mitochondria. They are also used to maintain the internal conditions of a cell, such as, for an example, the concentration of a particular organelle, such as a ribosome or a nucleus. So just an important point to note that cell membranes can exist as a single membrane or a double membrane, which is known as an envelope. And there's three different organelles which have a double membrane. So we need to know about the chloroplast, the nucleus and the mitochondria. And as I've just said, this is known as an envelope. So we're going to move on to the composition of a cell membrane. So here we have what's known as a phospholipid. So the phospholipid is made up of a glycerol molecule and a phosphate group, and this forms what's known as the hydrophilic head. And you've got two fatty acid carboxylic tails, which are known as a hydrophobic region. So the head is hydrophilic. That means it likes water. It consists of a glycerol molecule and a phosphate group, and this is the polar part of the cell membrane. Then the fatty acid tail is known, as I've just said, as a carboxylic acid, and it's also saturated, meaning that it has no carbon-carbon double bonds, and it has a hydrogen attached to every carbon. There is also a source of energy, and the tails are joined to the glycerol molecule through a process of condensation reactions which form an ester link, which is C double bonded O, and this also leads to the removal of a smaller molecule, water. So in order to represent cell membranes, you can use what's known as the fluid mosaic model, and I've drawn up just a rough sketch of what this model could look like. So here, the two components, you've got the two phospholipids, which is both known as the phospholipid bilayer. You have the phosphate heads with the glycerol molecule, and they also in the middle is what's known as the hydrophobic carboxylic acid tails. And I've also drawn a protein running through the membrane, which is known as an integral or an intrinsic protein, and I'll get onto the functions of these proteins in a moment. I've also drawn what's known as a glycolipid, which is just a lipid molecule with carbohydrate portions attached, and this has a role in cell adhesion and cohesion. And then the glycolax is just multiple areas known as glycolipids that are joined together, and this, as I've just said, plays a role in cell adhesion. So I've got the other components of the cell membrane, like I've just said. You've got two types of protein which can be found in the cell membrane. So we have extrinsic or extrinsic. So extrinsic can also be known as peripheral proteins, and intrinsic proteins can also be known as integral proteins. So these are the same thing, they've just got different names, so don't let that confuse you. So the function of proteins is they're able to act as identification for the cell, so for example antigens to enable vaccines or pathogens or anything else to bind to the cell. They also form channels to allow water-soluble molecules to cross the membrane. Obviously, because these, which are known the phospholipids, are hydrophobic, and therefore they will prevent any water molecules from crossing the membrane. So it's vital that the proteins are there to allow water-soluble molecules to cross. The proteins provide the cell membrane with structural support. They also have a role in cell adhesion. So, for example, glycoproteins, which are just proteins joined with carbohydrates. They also form ion channels to allow sodium ions, potassium ions, magnesium ions into the cell. Finally, we also have this smaller molecule, which you may have heard of, which is known as cholesterol. And the cholesterol provides the membrane with flexibility and strength, but it reduces the lateral movement of phospholipids in the monolayer. So therefore, it can provide the strength to the cell membrane because it joins to the hydrophobic tails. It is a hydrophobic molecule, so it joins and it's attracted to the hydrophobic tails, and it prevents these phospholipids from moving, so it adds structural strength to the membrane. And as I've just said, it is attracted to the hydrophobic tails because it is a hydrophobic molecule. And just to recap, hydrophobic is the repulsion of water. Hydrophilic is attraction to water. Well, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it informative and you've learned something new about cell membranes. Thank you very much. Goodbye.